Today I'm going to show you 7 different things you can do to start taking better videos with your Canon 60D. Tip number 1 is to get true focus. Now this one's pretty obvious to anybody who's been making videos for quite a while, but it's super important in making your videos stand out from amateur ones. So for many beginning filmmakers or cinematographers, the biggest issue is just not having their video in focus. So a great way to fix this is by using the magnification buttons on the 60D to get in close on your subject and then make sure their eyes are in focus. Another way is if you're using, say, the kit lens on the camera, the 18 to 55, is to zoom all the way into the 55 millimeters, get close on your subject and make sure you have focus, and then zoom back out for your shot. So with the 60D especially, the autofocus isn't amazing, so you want to be shooting in manual focus quite a bit, but the thing is with the 60D, you just want to make sure you have true focus every time. This is the way you're going to make sure your videos look just as good or better than a lot of the other ones you see. Now, I made a video talking about manual focus and how to always get true focus, so if you want to check that out, feel free and watch it. It's linked above. Tip number 2 is to shoot at 30 frames per second. With the Canon 60D, it cannot shoot at 60 frames per second at 1080p. It can do it at 720p, but that's just not high enough quality for today's standards. But if you're shooting your videos at 1080p 30 frames per second, this gives you the ability to slow down your footage a little bit. So an example of this is I shoot all of my B-roll at 30 frames per second, so then when I'm editing my footage in post, I can slow it down to 80% speed, and this is a way I can make my video look a little bit more cinematic. But if you're shooting at 30 frames per second for all your B-roll, you at least have the option to slow it down. In worst case scenario, you just don't slow it down. Now obviously you aren't slowing it down as much as say 60 frames per second, but it's still a way to get more out of your footage. Tip number 3 is to lower your aperture. This is a great way to make your videos look more cinematic because it gives you a shallow depth of field. A shallow depth of field essentially is isolating the subject you're focusing on and really drawing the attention to it. So whether it's a video where somebody's talking or say you're focusing in on a subject, that shallow depth of field goes a long way at making the shot look a lot better. So here's an example of a shot at a higher aperture and a shot at a lower aperture. As you can tell, it just helps the video look a lot more cinematic when shot at that lower aperture. So anytime you're trying to isolate your subject or focus on them, try lowering the aperture of your lens. You can do this by pressing the unlock button and then using the wheel to do that. Now, again, remember that this isn't something you want to do for every single shot, because say you're shooting a landscape shot, a lower aperture just isn't going to work because you want to be able to focus on multiple things and not just isolate something. But when you're trying to isolate your subject or just make a shot look cinematic focusing on, say, a person or an object, this is a huge way to improve your videos. Tip number 4 is to use body movement. What I mean by this is using your body to essentially get more cinematic shots. So a few examples of this are using your camera strap when you're shooting handheld. So this way you have it around your neck and pulled firmly against the camera. So this way there's a bit of tension so you can essentially move the camera and pan a little bit better than if you're just shooting handheld. Another thing you can do is position yourself in front of whatever your subject is and then slowly let yourself fall forward until you're just about to fall, and then you catch yourself obviously. But this essentially is going to give you a few seconds of footage that is really smooth and cinematic. Another really important thing to do is to use your legs for your movements. So you're going to stand regularly and you're essentially going to just lean with one knee towards one direction. This way you're going to get a smooth pan and a nice movement that has less jitter than if you were to actually walk over there or just move your arms over there. So if you're filming a shot where even you're just walking, try to just walk with a bit more of a gentle step. This way you're taking a little bit of that vibration away from the camera. It's a small thing, but it goes a long way when you're, say, adding stabilization to your footage in post. Tip number 5 is to correctly light. Now, lighting is something that separates amateur videos from more professional or just better videos, and it's something that takes a long time to figure out. It really just depends on what type of video you're shooting. So say you're shooting outside like I am now, there's a few things you can do to improve those shots a lot. So essentially you want to position yourself in a spot where you're going to get a lot of the sunlight on your face and you're going to be exposed correctly, but you're not going to be overexposed. Now, that's essentially the most you can do is position yourself with the sun, but there are a few things you can buy to improve your shots outside. So the number one thing I'd suggest is an ND filter. I talk about ND filters a lot because it's really probably the most important gear I've bought to make my shots better. This is because when you're shooting outside, the sun is pretty unpredictable and it can just be super bright outside. This can just overexpose your shots, and you have to adjust your settings really low to even be able to get the correct exposure. Now, if you just get an ND filter that's a variable one, you can just put that in front of your lens, and you're going to be able to get a shot that's correctly exposed with the settings you wanted originally. I don't know how many times I've had a shot saved because of a variable ND filter. Another piece of gear that can really help when shooting outside is a light bounce. This is usually a white bounce. There's also gold ones, and there's negative bounces. I don't use these a whole lot myself because I usually use an ND filter, and I don't usually have somebody to hold a light bounce. But if you do have somebody you're shooting with, or say you can have a stand holding that light bounce, it is a great way to either bounce some light onto your face and get a fill light, or even use a negative bounce to cut out some of the light and have your footage be exposed better. So when shooting outside, position yourself with the sun. Don't be afraid to move around if the sun is just changing too much, and try to invest in an ND filter or a light bounce. So say you're shooting most of your videos inside though. So when shooting inside, there's a few different things you can do to improve your lighting. The main things are to use window light, or say light from a door. This is a great way to just have free, bright lighting that will work really well to help improve your video. Now this isn't always the case because sometimes you're shooting at night. So when you do need more light, just try to add a lamp, or say, go out and buy a light specifically for your videos. So for a long time, all I do for my lighting inside is to use a lamp I already owned, and then I just put a frosted shower curtain over it. Now what this did was it softened the light and made it just look better. This is really important when shooting videos because if you just have one light source, it can be pretty harsh and can cause overexposure. You may still get it sometimes, but having just say like a frosted shower curtain, or even something like a pillowcase you can put over the light source, really helps soften and make it look better on your face or your subject. So the biggest thing when shooting inside is you don't want to crank up your ISO too high because this is going to give you a lot of grain. So you usually want to keep it around 800 or lower when shooting inside. You maybe can get away with shooting at 1000, but I try to keep my ISO as low as possible when I'm shooting inside and outside. Lighting is something that's going to take a long time to learn in general, but just making a few conscious decisions when shooting these small things will go a long way in making your videos look better. Tip number 6 is to get a wide shot, medium shot, and close-up shot. Having these 3 different shots can really add variety to your video. Being able to have a variety of shots that you can cut between is really important when making videos. Now, when shooting those shots, you usually want to have a tripod or stabilizer. This is because you want to be able to have a lockdown solid shot that you know will work. So what I do a lot of the times is I shoot my wide shot on a tripod because it's just getting the landscape. I usually shoot the medium shot on a tripod or stabilizer, and then the third shot I usually like to do handheld since I'm close to the subject. Now this can always change and you can shoot however you're more comfortable, but try to get a stable shot, that way you always can cut back to it if the other shots don't work. And the last tip is to practice. Now I said this in my photography tips video as well, and I'm saying it in this one because it's really the best way you're going to improve. There's a lot of different tips out there on how to make your videos better for really any camera, but the main thing is you have to go out and actually try those. I know for myself personally, over the last 4 years I've been making videos, and I really saw the most improvement over the last 2 because I made a conscious effort to actually implement the things I was learning. So I would watch YouTube videos on how to make my videos more cinematic, or how to improve my audio, and I would try to go out and film things and then come back and edit it and see how it looked. Basically the best way you're going to improve with the 60D is you're just going to have to go out and figure out what you like when making your videos. So the biggest thing I could suggest is really just practice a few of these things and see what you like. You don't have to implement all the different changes at once. These are just the big changes I've learned over the last year or 2 that have really helped me make more cinematic and meaningful videos with the Canon 60D. Those are my tips to improve your videos with the Canon 60D. I hope you can implement a few of these tips into your next video to really help improve with the camera. If you are shooting with the Canon 60D and want to improve your photography as well, check out the video I made a few weeks ago talking about Canon 60D photography tips. And don't forget, if you're new to the channel, subscribe. I post weekly videos on filmmaking and photography. And I'll see you guys next week.